at one point, so it's kind of a small world.
It's a very small world.
Thank you.
We'll talk about that a little bit. So, hey, good morning. Great to see you all. I'm Scott Robohn. It's like putting a robe on. It works. I can hear my wife's eyes rolling in the back of her head, having heard that several billion times. I have no AI-generated robo personality to bring to the conversation today, but I do want to talk about some of the organizational and people management issues around this. This is a huge time of change, and basically leaders got to lead through these times of change. So let's talk about how we think about this and how we've seen this movie before. There's a lot new with what's happening with AI and the technology change that it brings. But history may not repeat, but it rhymes, right? And so there are rhymes that we can definitely pull from the past. So let me give you a little background about myself. I'm going to talk about this guy named W. Edwards Deming. Who's heard of Deming? Okay, good. Most of you haven't, so I can say anything I want. That's excellent. Why Deming? What's happening in terms of resistance and disruption? Talk a little bit about a framework that's just a set of ideas that I pulled together called total network operations. I'll explain that to you. Talk about how to adjust and wrap up with, okay, how do we lead our way out of this and through this? I have some examples that may touch on individual names in the room. I will probably obfuscate those names, but some of you may know exactly what I'm talking about. So this guy named Deming, he was a luminary in statistical process control in the 30s all the way into the 90s. And he codified a lot of his ideas in the 14 principles. You can go read those. I'm not going to go give you a whole Deming primer. You can look it up if you'd like. But he really had a great combination of using data and statistical quality control and bringing in the human element and putting responsibility on leaders to actually lead. So one of his fundamental principles is if leadership puts a process in place, you don't have bad implementers of process. It's the leaders that put that in place. They decided, they made the decision. And it's their responsibility to make change and to listen to people as they experience this. And one of the signals, this is a great Selector analogy here, right? There's more data that we need to hear from the people actually implementing this and correlate that data. I learned about Deming as an industrial engineering student many, many years ago. There are other people who have come along and said, what if I applied his principles to DevOps? John Willis, right? So Jeremy introduced me to this gentleman named John Willis a few years ago who really challenged reapplication of what's old being new again. And that's caused me to think about, okay, we talk about NetDevOps. What matches from DevOps for networking? What doesn't match? And what if I just did a first principles application of Deming to network engineering? That's kind of a motivator for what I've done. If he were still with us today, I'm very convinced, this is a very safe bet because it's never going to be challenged unless Greg puts together an AI Deming, it might be out there already, he'd be all over AI. He'd be all over how do I use this for process improvement. Okay? So again,
can you start over?
Welcome back. Thanks for joining us, Eamon. So I started out in industrial engineering roots here, hearing about all this stuff before I knew anything about networking. By the way, I had a very early revelation that there was this really interesting correlation about widgets moving through a manufacturing system and packets through a network. And that was a big aha moment for me in the early 90s when I was really getting into networking. We have these really foundational ideas in DevOps, like development and operations. And what if I reduce the administrative distance between the developers and the people actually running this stuff? That's a foundational principle in DevOps. It's great in many organizations. How do I apply that to NetOps, and how do I use AI for this? That's my circle of life, if you will. Just a little, where did I come from? Man, I shouldn't have put the number up there. Look, I entered the workforce in '91. I actually started doing co-ops as an undergrad in 1986. So if I really start the clock ticking, that number gets bigger, and never mind, why did I even mention that? But I landed early in my career at Bell Atlantic, part of the Verizon mega corporation now, and had my very first network automation project, which was writing expect scripts to log into Bay Networks routers, just to grab information, right? So network automation is not new. Do we agree?
Yes.
Bash, Perl, right? We've been trying to make this simpler and easier for at least 3 decades, 4 decades, right? For as long as people have been logging into devices and trying to cut down on keystrokes. Not a new idea. I thought about this after I put the slide together. My first contact with AI was in the form of expert systems in 1990. And long story short, in one of my last graduate courses at Penn State University, I took an expert systems class. And I did not finish the final paper, and I left campus without graduating, and I didn't actually graduate until after I handed that expert systems paper in. So AI has been a bane of my existence from day one, just kidding. But AI is not new. There's many preceding technologies that have been worked on for a very long time. We're just seeing this next spike in innovation, and however that translates into the Gartner hype cycle. So. Fast forward, through the aughts and the 2010s, we did see this increasing momentum for being more programmatic in the way we deal with network infrastructure, right? And Jeremy, I'm just going to embarrass you, right? I watched Jeremy get it and understand that there's more we can do here to get away from the CLI. To oversimplify it. It's obviously much more than just getting away from the CLI. But like other people in this room, it takes people who are willing to take out the machete and cut their way through the jungle, right? And that's a key attribute of, I think, multiple speakers up here today. They're not always going to be appreciated for really trying to change how it's done. But years later, you figure out, yeah, wow, that was really useful, right? And so that's what really got me thinking about network automation. Fast forward to 2022, let's just say I had been itching for a long time to go do my own consulting work. And that's what I do now. I've co-founded a consulting outfit called Solutional, a wonderfully generic name. And I caught this State of Network Automation survey that had just recently been taken over by Chris Grundeman. And I saw the report. I think others had been doing it before Chris. Might have been Deming and Garros for a time, yeah. And I just thought, I'd really like to read that report. And then I said, no, I'd really like to talk to Chris. And we just started batting around the ideas of, what's the holdup with the adoption of network automation? Not an AI conversation at that point. And we said, we're just 2 people, probably should get more opinions in on the mix. That turned into the first Network Automation Forum AutoCon 0 event, because like all good engineers, where do you start indexing? 0. Had nothing to do with Juniper interface numbering. Actually, it had everything to do with Juniper interface numbering. But we just started getting people together talking about this. And we had our first event in 2023, and we had been a year into the release of ChatGPT. Right? That first year was everyone's minds blowing, right? What can I do with this? And going from really poor initial quality to increasing in step functions. And at that first event, I expected, wow, there's going to be some really interesting AI content around network automation. And there was hardly any. And I was scratching my head. And don't worry, we'll pull on that thread. There are multiple reasons for that. I'm going to say the initial reason in 2023 was nothing had become mature enough to work it into production networks at that point. Would you agree? 2023, there wasn't a whole lot of AI anything going on at Lumen or other? Not much. That's changed a lot. Yeah, ML has been a technology that's been super useful for a long time. And I know Selector probably has lots of other data points around that as your technologies have evolved. So this helped me broaden my scope, and this is where John Willis comes in. Where at that first AutoCon 0, he talked about really needing to think outside your silos, right? Really look at adjacencies, but even read other stuff to think very differently. So I took the challenge. It wasn't a personal conversation. It was part of a keynote address. And I just started reading outside boundaries, and I said, we really need to recapture a more holistic view of how we operate networks. And so that led to the only AI-generated content I have in this presentation. I started developing a framework called Total Network Operations that said, let's look at how everything is connected, right? Your infrastructure, your trouble ticket tooling, your automation, how optical and IP and security interact. Think about it as a highly connected system, because it is. Despite the specialties that we may all have, and it's not wrong to specialize, there's a layer where I need to see how things connect. I took it from a framework, and I bothered this guy in the front right, Ethan Banks, for let's do podcast, let's do podcast, let's do podcast, let's do podcast. And
you're not exaggerating. You did quote me about that much. Yeah.
See? So I'm not making this up. And it's turned into a great set of conversations many of you in the room have been a part of, and I'm really grateful for that. Okay, so our current context and point of inflection, right? That's 22. Sorry for the typo. We already referenced, ChatGPT, web front end to intelligence that we've never accessed before, artificial intelligence, okay? 24, new stuff just keeps on coming. Every month, new models. I went from ChatGPT to now we talk about Claude and Gemini, and Hugging Face has over 2 million models on it now, right? Not implying that they're all the same quality, right? But you've got choices, and you've got things you can play with here, right? And let's talk about this. The arms race in AI infrastructure investment. You might have heard a little bit about data center construction, maybe. I was just at an event in London a couple weeks ago, Data Center Dynamics, London Connect event, where everybody in the data center ecosystem is coming together. Construction people, the permitting people, the site selection people, the power people, the energy people. Were you there? You were not there.
No, I wasn't, but the power people are really concerned. They haven't got enough places to get power from.
They're going everywhere they can, right? And not just the powered shell and concrete, but what you put in it. The compute, the GPU, the software layers, the orchestration layers, the storage, and the networking that connects it all together, right? Hundreds of billions of dollars. Hundreds of billions of dollars. Hundreds of billions. If you sum it up, it's getting into the trillions, right? So if you have any doubt about where this is going, or if it's real, I'm just going to point you right here, right? Are we in a bubble? Maybe. I'm not going to. How do you define bubble? Let's not waste time on that. Just because there might be bubble-like things happening doesn't mean it's not useful, right? And perfect example, investment in fiber infrastructure. There was a time when there was there's way more fiber than we'll ever need in the ground. Did we find uses for it eventually? Yes, we did, and certainly Lumen did. So this is just keep going up and to the right, okay? Has anybody encountered resistance regarding this? Yeah. So, I'm just going to rhyme with some things that have already been said by Greg. There is this AI will take my job concern. And let's not just be flip about this. I usually start this conversation with, yes, there is real disruption coming as a result of AI. And that's happened with any other new technology that we've introduced, right? We can talk about the move to cloud, right? IT infrastructure went from private data centers to cloud, and it changed IT administrators' jobs significantly. Did smartphones have any impact on you as a person and society? They sure did, right? If you're in technology, you've asked for a life of disruption. You may not realize this, okay? But it's the surfboard, and I'm not a surfer, so I'm going to get all these analogies wrong, and you can probably already tell that anyway. But you chose this life, right? And if you thought the technology decisions you made 25 years ago would last for your entire career, I'm sorry. I have contradictory news for you, right? And you might be able to ride it out to retirement, right? But you could also do a lot more to benefit from adopting, okay, what's coming at me, right? And this is just a restatement of the Sam Altman quote, right? Choosing not to engage with AI is what will cost me my job as it exists, right? And most of us who are in tech, who likes to learn new stuff? Could you raise your hand? I have opportunity for you, right? And we're so early in this. Like, if this were a song, we're still within the first 5 seconds of Sabotage by the Beastie Boys, right? Or Don't Stop by Red Hot Chili Peppers, right? Which, take your pick, right? This is just getting started. So, I come not to bury Caesar, but to praise him. Let's talk about the CCIE effect and technical certifications. Okay. Who's got a networking certification in here? Has it been useful to you? Heck yeah. And I expect almost 100% with that, right? It was useful at a time in the development and deployment of technology. I was a JNCIE, number 25. Right? I wanted number 23, but another guy who took the test the same day as I did also had a last name that started with R, Todd Reganini, if you're listening. And Reganini comes before Robohn. So he got 23 because I wanted Michael Jordan's number. I wanted to be the Michael Jordan of JNCIE. Clearly, the stars did not ordain that. But 25 is doubly prime. It's the product of 2 primes. So I'm good with that as a math nerd. So, but we have this whole ecosystem that's built around memorizing long strings of detailed commands. And we needed it for a time. Like, I'm not here to just throw it under the bus. But I think an unintended side effect has been we have a whole system of network engineers who are really focused on this mode of getting the router to do what I want it to do. And I'll refer you to a talk by Anna Claiborne at AutoCon 2, where she talks about this at length. You can find it on YouTube. It's probably one of the best research keynotes, no pressure, that I've ever seen at a conference, where she goes into great detail on this. So go look at that for more detail on this. I'm going to assume this is true. Okay? On the disruption front, we all have our favorite examples, right? I started out early working on secure telephony. And yes, that's how you say it, telephony. I as a DoD contractor, got to work on the follow-on to the STU-3. The STU-3 was the Secure Terminal Unit 3 for analog encrypted voice communications. The STE, Secure Terminal Equipment, was the ISDN follow-on. And I did a deep dive into telephony early in my career. And it was fascinating. It's what got me reading Applied Cryptography by Bruce Schneier, and understanding what a call flow diagram looks like, calling party and called party. Sorry, too nerdy, I get it. But we didn't start there, right? Early on in the development of the telephone system, we had people making connections, right? Again, it was a technology and a job that was important for its time. But we found a way to do it better. This is actually not the first real instantiation of switchboards. You know what happened before largely women were doing switchboard jobs? You had kids on roller skates, skating through what were the primordial central office, making those connections. And it turned out that kids were too unreliable, and they goofed around, and they started playing rollerball. Sorry, bad James Caan movie reference. And they needed more stability. So people actually ended up actively recruiting young women into this job. We found a way to automate this, first with mechanical switches, then electrical switches, and you could have made the argument at the time that I'm really disrupting this technology, right? And it's true, that was disruptive, but it didn't limit the growth of the requirement for telephone services. In fact, it just exploded, right? I'm not just saying it exploded because of the automation of this particular job, but yes, there was disruption, but it created lots more opportunity. Okay? We won't dive in. We've already seen the automotive manufacturing discussion. I really like the paradigm of an automation puts the wheel on, an automation inserts the transmission, an automation puts the doors on, and an orchestration ties all those things together. And multiple orchestrations actually give me a car. I think that's a super functional definition of automation and orchestration. Okay. So, not the first time we've seen this. You have to zoom out, right? You always have to zoom out and say, okay, what's eliminated versus what's created, what's transformative, right? And being early enough in the wave to actually benefit from it, right? One thing is very, very different and important today with technical disruption. You live in an information environment and access to learning about stuff that no one in human history has had. I'm going to say that again. You live in an information environment where no one before us in human history has had. You can go learn about anything. Is the noise floor high? You betcha. And we're not even talking about AI-generated content, right? You can find everybody's, and their brother's blog page about who knows what, right? But my number one training utility right now is YouTube. If I need 10 minutes or less of medium to deep dive on something, I can almost always find it on YouTube. Who knew? Who knew that we could do that, right? So you have no excuses. There's so much no-cost information available to you out there to learn about AI and everything that's been talked about and will be talked about this afternoon. I know some other people who put a lot of stuff on YouTube, by the way. So let me talk about the big ideas from total network operations and how I think they help here, okay? This is just Deming's principles reapplied, not redefined. He was big on systems thinking, right? It's all a system, right? How do those automations work together in any manufacturing flow? Well, how do all my workflows work together in the network? How does all my tooling work together? My observability, my automations, the interaction with the network infrastructure, it's all highly intertwined, right? That's a whole Earth catalog term from a long time ago. Deming was big on continuous improvement, small batches. Try a change, measure the results, then figure out, okay, how do I scale it or how do I correct? Empowering people to make those small changes, right? Because you're going to get this network effect from how many people are in your organization? Are you open to ideas from any of them? Yeah. Try small things and see what can scale, right? That's iteration in our current environment, right? Gathering data, figuring out what works, right? That's got to drive how we operate, right? Some people like data informed versus data driven. If we want to talk over a beer later, I'm happy to discuss that with you. But Deming also just puts this responsibility on leadership, right? There are things that happen in the boardroom. There are things that happen at the executive level that it's not power, it's responsibility. The decisions you're making impact people's lives, right? And you obviously, if you're in a public corporation, you have goals you need to achieve from a financial perspective. But you need to balance and understand, okay, what does this do to my team and the individuals in the organization? Okay. I've learned one huge thing in the past couple years when it comes to automation, whether it's standard or what can I do with AI? And its workflow definition matters. There are no shortcuts here, right? You can't automate what you don't know that you're doing, right? You have to have very specific understanding of those processes, right? And just to give a little preview, we're working on a case study of what Greg has done at Lumen with Selector and Itential, and that's one of the things that struck me. Like, you're able to do things and benefit from your AI-related experiments because of the groundwork you've laid in defining over 1,000 workflows, and now the number's up to automating 350. There was only 320 a few months ago, so kudos. There's no shortcut around this. You've got to do the work, right? You've got to document them, right? And then you can automate them. The picture doesn't stop here, though, right? Now that I've automated something, a couple different things can happen. The process of automating it might make it much more accessible. And if I could only do it once or twice a day when it was a manual process, now I could do it 10,000 times a day. There's incredible value that can come from that easy repeatability. So there's so much more I can get with repeatability here. I also might find that my manual process with new tooling can be done differently. So in this process, you've got to be open to, okay, changing my workflows or adding new workflows with the new tooling I have. Make sense? Got some nods. Are you nodding? Okay, good. Just making sure. All right. Here's my picture of a holistic view of a system. You will see that I am not a graphic artist. And this is not completely representative of everything we do in NetOps. But the foundation is the infrastructure you're working with. And I just name names here because we live in the real world. And I think I listed vendors alphabetically, just to be safe, right? So Arista, Cisco, Juniper, Nokia. White boxes. I won't even name all the white box vendors we can deal with. The open and disaggregated network operating systems, right? That's all, that's real. And the disaggregated model is really, really interesting. I'll be talking more about that another time. But the cloud infrastructure is just as real, even though it's abstracted, right? And I know William will probably have some fun things to say about this, right? This is what I have to operate and manipulate, right? And then I'm using automation and network orchestration to get things done. I'm collecting observability information. Yes, I'll update that block. AIOps goes in here. Sorry, that's a typo. Multi-cloud networking was a big thing. It's not as big as I thought it would be a couple years ago, right? And we'll talk about how to think about those things. I've got digital twin technologies, the ability to model, whether it's picking NetOps, for LSPs or what have you, and then you can't leave security out of the picture. And relegating security to this little bucket, that's not fair, right? It's a much broader set of technologies, right? We had some interesting break conversations on that front. I got to think about how this all works across silos, but I also need to go top to bottom, right? How do I tie to my business requirements, mission requirements if you're in a military context, right? All the way through all these domains. I don't want to call them silos. They are different technology domains. I got to have business reasons for what I'm doing. Big picture. It all fits together. Now, in our life of tech disruption, this is a horrible ripoff from Glengarry Glen Ross. You see this watch. And I don't have a set of steak knives to offer anyone, right? But always be evaluating. There's a discipline that ops teams in particular need to develop. Like, let's admit it, right? There's a hierarchy. The financial decision makers, right? And the VPs of organizations and maybe the highest level architects, they're the ones that get to go to dinner with the vendors, right? And those decisions get made, and engineers usually take what decisions are made and they have to implement them. But it doesn't end there. Then there's the operators, right? That need to catch everything that's flowing downhill, right? And deal with it, right? And part of my motivation behind Total Network Operations has been helping operations participate in its own rescue, right? Develop a discipline of looking at tools for your operations context so you know what's coming. And this will be a shameless vendor plug, but this is exactly how you would start looking at a selector, right? I have a new set of observability capabilities that I've never played with before. My always be evaluating motion should allow me to identify and come in and test, like those Deming small batch experiments, to see is this something useful for my network, right? And by the way, this doesn't just have to be a network operations discussion. You can broaden this to IT operations, right? Across many, many silos. But I'm a networker, so I'm going to stick to that for today, right? You should always be on the lookout for what's new and useful from an ops perspective. Obviously, AI tooling fits this category squarely today. You should be thinking about, okay, what is it? How do I do initial evaluation? How do I set up a pilot program? How do I develop a culture that lets me do that? And then measure what I'm doing. Like, you've got to figure out what you want to get out of a new tool, collect the right data to help you make the decision on whether or not it was useful to you or not. Okay? Now, we put a lot on individual contributors when it comes to tech. Right? How many of you in any individual contributor role, maybe you had to learn RSVP for the first time. This MPLS thing, I'm not going to be able to avoid it. I know it's coming. Alcatel-Lucent was barking about it. Juniper was barking about it. Cisco gave us LDP. They actually gave us TDP first. But you were learning about this on nights and weekends, right? Any new tech that comes along, we kind of force that on individual contributors. How do I create new motions in the org to benefit from those experiments on the previous slide? And adapt my organization as the new tooling comes into play. So how do I support my people to learn new stuff? And then what does the new stuff do? And this is where the agentic AI discussion comes in squarely, right? Is there potential for agents to replace people? I'm not going to use the word replace, but I can definitely offload tasks. I can definitely offload work. Some people will use the term digital coworker. There's no one right or wrong way to talk about this. Some people like the whole idea of an avatar associated with an agent or digital coworker. I'm not there. I find that creepy. But that's just how I roll. So the fact is that I can take more and more junior level, entry level tasks and have agents doing them with the right human click OK to continue checks until we have shown proven repeatability. What's the metric? 1,000 times? If I do it 1,000 times and I understand the error conditions whenever they're encountered, that's enough to trust it? Did I get that right? Roughly? Okay. Okay, all right. But this is a real thing, right? And just like we had budget transformation for cloud, like budgets shifted from capital purchases for IT equipment to my monthly cloud bill. You'll see budget shift from personnel costs to token costs, or however your AI suppliers are going to charge for that, right? That's happening. That's going to have a ripple effect, right? You're going to have a higher concentration of mid to senior workers, right? So I need skills on how to become an agent boss, right? How much do I, how well can I multitask? That's not the complete way of saying it, but like how many processes can I spin up and manage, right? And I think that's an acquired skill over time. Certainly it's one, it has elements for people management and interaction. There's a different set of skills here to layer on as you think about managing your agents, right? And then what capabilities do I have to capture what I'm doing as an organization and turn it into an LLM that can help spin up any new people that come into the organization? Like I had a really interesting conversation a couple months ago with an optically focused software provider, Light River. And they were very open about how they're using AI internally to develop their code and onboard new engineers, right? And nobody's afraid of it. Nobody's worried about jobs getting cut. They see this as a huge labor saver. So great proof points are coming out there. So in terms of adapting, here are real use cases that I'm running into persistently, and this probably won't surprise you. Natural language, killer use case for AI. What's your next question? Being able to talk to the network, right? I see Selector doing it. I see in the last year a handful of other quality vendors doing this as day one. It just makes sense. Do we finally have intent-based networking? Yeah, but we're closer. We're closer. I can express my intent more easily. It's not perfect, right? Because of the, a non-deterministic response I can get from LLMs, but I can help fine-tune the models for that. I can help find ways to provide the right context and ask the questions better. Yep, prompt engineering. Yep. So there are ways to do that better. Data reduction. I think and this will resonate with you. Sorting through large volumes of network telemetry and observability data, right? LLMs are great at this, right? And what about cross-domain data? What if I can do that across, not just IP and optical, but include security, maybe weather data, depending on what kind of network I'm running, right? The ability to get to actionable information quickly. We've never had this capability before, but it does depend on the quality of the data. Remember how 5 years ago data science was the hot thing, right? I think data engineering now needs a resurgence, right? Because I run into more and more enterprise customers that are finding that, here's the worst example. Versioning good, right? Versioning data is very, very good. How many of you, even though you might have version control capabilities within Microsoft Word, for example, save as new file name -sfr, those are my initials, right? And how many enterprises have 17 copies of a single file slightly modified? That leads to your data swamp, right? And that's just a very, very simple example of that. There's a lot of work to be done on the data quality stuff. Asking questions directly about the data, right? Not only can you just verbalize it, you can ask it as many times in as many different ways as you want. And unless it's a very snarky LLM, intentionally, it's not going to say, Scott, that's a stupid question. You've asked me 5 times already. It's going to be a very patient tutor, a very patient executor on whatever it is you're asking for. Okay? And then getting to real troubleshooting, right? Problem identification, waking up in the morning and saying there's a problem in the Seattle office. And my AI tooling says it looks like it's this port on the CPE device, right? Gets me to it quickly. And it can take what might be 172 trouble tickets and put it in one trouble ticket. That's real today. That's already happening, right? So you can skill up. Like you can know, okay, what does different interaction with models mean? And again, this is beyond prompt engineering, but asking questions the right way, providing the right context, right? That's a skill. Technical domain experience still matters. And I think Conan talked on this early on, right? Networks have not gone away. And I still need people who know what loss of signal means, what loss of frame means, right? Who know what duplicate IP addresses mean, right? Having that domain experience is still important. It's not ever going to go away completely, right? And then, how do I know when to trust the AI agent to work autonomously? Like, what are the guardrails you're willing to put in place to check error conditions and outputs? There's a programming lesson to be learned here, error handling, right? So if I'm getting non-deterministic output, I need a way to evaluate, okay, what's within the bounds of acceptability and what's not, right? You need to define that for your own organization for particular functions. All right. The numbers don't lie. The spending is there. Software development is the #1 impacted area here. I have a son-in-law who works for a very large software engineering organization that you would recognize the name of, and he's living this every day, right? And that whole agent boss mentality, he was kind of stuck at 3 agents for a while. And it took him a while to figure out, okay, here's how I get to 5, right? Tweaking the agents, tweaking what they can do, right? But this is real. And doesn't this make sense from a software development perspective? Seems like that, it makes perfect sense that would be an area initially impacted very significantly, right? All right, how do you react? Okay? We've got to be thinking about what digital coworkers look like. Different companies are coming along and doing some really interesting things with this. I kind of started asking the question, and don't laugh at me, please don't laugh at me. What's the difference between an agent and a feature? I can use agents to deliver features, but I can use agents to do much more than just a single feature. They can take action on an aggregation of features and functions. So they're super features, super functionality, right? They don't have PTO. They don't take lunch, right? How can I put these things to use, right? We've automated so many other things, right? Do you still want to keep books for your business on paper ledger? Maybe you do, and I won't take that away from you. But I could point you to some really good accounting packages that can really help you with that today, right? We have not begun to see the implementation of what can be done here. We already covered what does it mean to manage multiple agents. From a network automation perspective, kind of just like those agent comments a couple minutes ago. Is AI in just another form of network automation? Not just another. It can be used to do automation, but it can be used to do so much more, right? That's my differentiator here after thinking about this for a couple years pretty hard. Now, we've got all this tooling, right, that we know about, right? And we've got these new things coming at us. Is it time to drop all this? Is it time to just cut over and stop getting better at Python? Stop learning about infrastructure as code comments? My answer is no. It's not time yet, right? And we'll talk about this with personalities and where people sit in the industry. You want to always be evaluating. And you should be evaluating, right? And you're going to hear some great examples of those experiments this afternoon, right? If I'm an enterprise CIO, which I am not, but I have stability needs. It could be for public sector. It could be for any enterprise, right? I'm going to make sure this works for me before I say, yeah, you don't need to worry about the older technologies yet. Ask me in a year, I might have a different answer. But September 2025, that's my answer on this right now. Okay. We not only can connect the silos, connect the data swamps across multiple technology domains, and connect it to what we're doing from a business objective perspective, but we also have predictive capability, right? There's modeling and there's, how do I know when that optic's gonna fail? Or do I know I'm close enough to a particular optic failing and I happen to be dispatching somebody to that site? Why not swap the optic now? Because I've identified this one as in a month, it's gonna fail. There's all sorts of cost optimization and things I can do in this arena that, yeah, we've had ML and we've had other algorithmic techniques that can help with this, but this is really a democratizer when it comes to stuff like this. Okay. I'm not even going to comment on this because there's going to be plenty of substantive discussion on MCP agent to agent and more. I'll let the experts speak to that. But let me close out on leaders, okay? Leaders gotta lead. And again, we've seen this movie before, right, with other technology waves. And here, I mean, I'm speaking from personal experience here. Whether it's cloud adoption, network automation, other technologies that have swept over us, you know, other steamrollers that have come at us before. Do you want to be part of the road or part of the steamroller? I don't want to be part of the steamroller. I would like to be driving the steamroller. That's how I'm going to adapt that. Psychological safety is a thing, right? And you've got to create space for people to experiment. And you're going to see a stratification of people on your team. They're going to be the people who get it and just want to be the ones with the machete hacking through the jungle. And you need to encourage that. You need to leverage it. You need to find ways to not just, I mean, let it happen. I don't even want to say control it, because control is an illusion, right? But there are people who are going to gravitate to the technology. They're going to figure out, wow, there's a whole other world here. There are also going to be people on the same team who resent that. What do you do? Well, there's a lot of rolling up your sleeves and talking to people on your team, right? You really have to engage. And for the people who are not there, it's like, you know, you don't have to be in the same place that this other person is, you know. But people have different interests and they develop at different speeds, and we need to figure out what's best for our team. There's a lot of personal engagement that you need to have on those ends of the spectrum and in between, right? Not everybody's going to be at the same level of adoption for any new technology, right? But I really, really encourage leaders, you just got to engage and talk and go get coffee or whatever beverages you prefer, you know, for these kind of conversations. Don't let it simmer. Don't let it boil over, because it's going to cause problems if it does, okay? Don't force people to do it off hours. Create sandboxes, create time, you know, give them Fridays to experiment, or Friday afternoon, or whatever, you know, you think is the right amount of time for that. Create an environment where it's acceptable to play with what's happening with LLMs and MCP. Modeling behavior. And this is a little risky, but I'm just going to say it. Sometimes you need to hold people up as a positive example. You want to do that in a way that doesn't create more jealousy, but people who show proclivity for the new tooling and can use it in a constructive way, you can hold that up as an example. Like, that could be very concrete, right? If you're wondering how you want to grow your career, Colin, picking on Colin in the front row, sorry. Here's some concrete examples. Like, that's like one of the most common things in providing employee feedback. Can you give me some specific examples? It's like, well, I don't want to give you specific examples because I don't want you to hold me accountable for anything. And that's the wrong answer, right? You know, be like Dave, right? So, and then communicating vision and managing that change. Communicate, communicate, communicate. You know, the example with meeting with a customer about the status of an outage, yeah, why not apply that internally as well? If it's important enough to do it with your customers, you should be doing it with everybody on your team. Okay. I kind of already covered this ahead of time, right? You're gonna have the haters, right? You're gonna have the advanced staff, right? And you're gonna have everybody in between. Right? There isn't one solution to every organization on this. And again, that fear of AI taking my job and making me less important, right? There are definitely psychological, where do I get my value from conversations here. Again, that's out of scope for this conversation, but it's real and it matters, right? People need to understand that their value as humans doesn't come from what they do during the day at work, right? And that's a hard decoupling. Like, we have lots of dependency on that in our culture today. Okay. Is there stuff you can do? Yeah. On the tactical side, right? Well, What are some low-risk use cases? Duan had the slide of the 4 quadrants, right? High payoff, low effort, right? Great place to start, right? What are good AI tools for my organization? I don't know. Well, you should know. You should start somewhere and iterate on what, okay, this is going to be useful. If you want 0 hallucinations, sorry, that's not even fair. If you want 100% predictability, it means you don't understand the technology, right? So 100% consistent response from an LLM is probably not the right criteria on here, right? I keep talking about doing this across organizations, right? Well, how do you talk across different teams in your organization? You're NetOps, right? You guys are running the network. Do you think finance has something to do with what you do? Yeah. Is there a way to wrap them in, right? Is there a way to get the customer service reps engaged in the conversation, right? Think across those boundaries, right? And do some regular literacy training, right? I know it seems hard because nothing changes here and there isn't a lot of new information. Yeah, but there are YouTube channels you can go to where every month there's something, every day, that might be something worth looking at, right? On the strategic side, again, leaders, you've got to be thinking about budget, because if you don't get budget, none of the rest of it matters. Whether it's for training efforts or an initial start of pilot programs, right? You got to get the funds to go do it. How is this impacting my org? What does my hiring plan look like for 2026 in the light of everything we're talking about? Okay, maybe for 2026 it doesn't change, but be thinking about 2027. I had another set of conversations with a large enterprise IT organization where the leader of that organization basically wants to effectively reduce his level 1 and level 2 techs, right? And he believes he can do it, right? So he's thinking ahead. He didn't put a timeline on that, smart guy. But there are already people thinking about what does that org impact look like? What does my partnership look like with my vendors? We throw the term partnership around all the time. I would encourage you to think of it meaningfully, right? It's not transactional. It's not just PO to PO. It's like helping them understand what are your real business problems, how you operate, and having a dialogue, a deep dialogue between purchase orders, right? And then what's happening from a talent acquisition perspective. Yeah, we got somebody who can help with that. What new skills do you need to look for, especially in this area? Here's an interesting attribute I've come across multiple times this year. And I'll reduce it to having a healthy skepticism of LLM output. So not discarding it and not ignoring it, but being able to think critically about the outputs you receive, right? And that's important right now. And by the way, what does that imply? Subject matter expertise. I still have to understand BGP if I want to evaluate what this model is telling me about my different peering relationships. Okay. You got a choice. It's up to you, right? It's not whether the steamroller will roll over you, right? Or the steamroller will roll, right? It's not a matter of whether or not AI is going to transform NetOps. Like we've already had an excellent example earlier today that it is, and it can very constructively. But are you going to lead it or be led by it, right? And that's kind of up to you. So I have a lot of conversations about this with many different people. Reach out if you'd like to. If you have something important to say here, you want to come on a podcast and talk about it, you're having trouble with it in your org, hit me up. You can just do scott@solutional.com. That'll reach me too. Thank you all very much.